I want to talk about the impact of tuning on real-world applications. We often hear that performance tuning yields awesome results, improving queries per second or database server latency. But I want to present a research that demonstrates how MySQL performance tuning impacts real applications. And before we move forward, I want to provide the background about my first-hand experience with MySQL. I'm a software engineer and founder of Releem. Releem is a cloud service that helps engineers to tune MySQL configuration to improve performance. I've been using MySQL since 2008. I worked as developer, support engineer, and so on. My agenda today is to cover the following topics. I'll talk about opportunities to improve performance of real applications. And I talk about why I decided to talk about the impact of MySQL performance tuning, and what applications were tested to measure the impact of tuning, and how specifically did we measure. And finally, I'll review the results of our testing. And we have several opportunities to improve performance of applications. We can improve server resources like CPU, memory, storage. Yeah, we could add more cores or faster cores. We can tune software configuration like operating system, web servers. We can tune database server configuration. We can optimize database scheme, change indexes, and finally we can optimize application, code, queries, maybe architecture. Every step has a different impact on performance, but they depend on each other. It's an interconnected system. For example, even greatly optimized queries may be slow if MySQL doesn't use enough memory. Of course, application optimization can bring an awesome impact, but only when resources are consistent with the workload and database configuration is tuned. And in my practice, I've seen a lot of experienced engineers who don't look at performance tuning as an opportunity to improve the performance of the applications. Because they don't know this domain. They spend a lot of time optimizing the code base, but it reaches a point where it's not longer bring a valuable result. I've endeavored to research how MySQL performance tuning affects the performance of popular open source web applications to show developers that it may be a good way to improve the performance of their apps. I asked the Drupal and Laravel open source communities to help me, and I received awesome feedback. Several developers enthusiastically agreed to spend their time helping me research this topic. And we chose the following popular open source software for testing. And it is Drupal Commerce Kickstart, e-commerce solution based on Drupal. It is Muse, an e-commerce solution based on Laravel, and Bagista, e-commerce solution based on Laravel too, but it is still in testing now. And we'll publish the results once the testing is finished. For testing, we used AWS instances with Debian 11 installed and MariaDB 10.5. In this test, we tuned MariaDB because it is in Debian repository. And for each application we tested, we repeated the following steps. We deploy the application with default configuration on EC2 instance. Seed database with data to create databases with different size. Prepare test for JMeter and run JMeter test using BlazeMeter platform for 10 minutes. And after test, our setup remained the same, but MariaDB was tuned, and after that, we rerun our test. And the first application we deployed and tested was Drupal Commerce Kickstart. And the configuration we used is EC2 instance C5X large. It's 4 cores and 5 gigabytes RAM. And there installed Debian 11, Nginx, and PHP FPM as a web server, and MariaDB.5 set with default configuration. We prepared test with around 20 page views and cart actions. All test was saved and will be published. Test ran for 10 minutes with 20 users. And there is the first result. It's about latency. And blue line is the test result with default MariaDB configuration, and yellow line is the test result with tuned MariaDB configuration. We see on the graph that latency of the website with the tuned configuration is stable and reduced by 63% compared to default configuration. Also, we recorded CPU utilization and queries per second graphs. Queries per second, it means how many queries the database server executed per 1 second. And on the graphs, by blue line is the server metrics with default MariaDB configuration, and the red line is server metrics with tuned MariaDB configuration. We see on the graphs that CPU utilization with the tuned MariaDB configuration is reduced. But queries per second is increased by 2%. This is overall results. And queries per second has not a great improvement, but we have an awesome improvement in latency and CPU utilization. And next application we deployed and tested is Drupal Commerce Kickstart with database size 3 gigabytes. We test and the server configuration for this test remained the same as for previous test. There we see on the latency graph, we see increased latency compared to the previous test. But as in previous test, latency on a site with the tuned MySQL configuration is reduced dramatically. And on graphs with CPU utilization, we see that on default configuration, CPU utilization increased by up to 100%. And tuned configuration, there also looks great. When we look at the overall results, we can see that the tuned configuration performed better in that test too. And the last third application we deployed and tested was Muse with a database size 500 megabytes. And the test ran for 10 minutes with 2 users. So we decreased number of users because this installation worked not fast, and we couldn't finish test with the default configuration. But you should know the installation with tuned configuration worked better. And there is the results about latency. Latency with tuned configuration reduced by 42% compared to default configuration. And there is graphs with CPU utilization and queries per second. Also, we can see that tuned configuration performed much better. And there is overall results. And when we look at the results of all the tests, we reveal a clear trend. The result of tuned configuration is always better than the default. This was consistent across Drupal, Muse applications and for different database size, more than 500 megabytes. The application latency is dramatically reduced. CPU utilization is reduced and queries per second is increased because the configuration has been tuned with best practices. The test results show that MySQL performance tuning may present a great opportunity for developers to improve the performance of their web applications. Developers that implement MySQL performance tuning as a part of their development process will see greater performance improvements compared to those that optimize the code base alone. The research I've presented today is the result of a thriving open source community. The developers who assisted me spent their own free time on this project. And I want to thank you, the Laravel and Drupal communities, for their great help and support in this line of research. And I want personally mention and thank several developers, Sergey, Georg, and Yazan. Okay, thank you so much for listening to me today. Hope I have presented some interesting ideas that you could implement in your future projects. Any questions? Yeah.
It's not a question. Thank you. It's not a question, but I received some insights about optimization techniques for you execute on the database side. Could you mention that a little bit? What tunes or what parameters change for the execute or improve query per second or CPU utilization?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Actually, we will publish this research. There are best practices, buffers, and configuration was tuned for server resources, workload, and database size.
There is no magic trick like you should take a look at this one.
Yeah, yeah.
Best practice.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So how much, so I assume that like by default when you launch a database on RDS, I assume that it comes already tuned, right? So how much more can you tune at RDS database? Do you think there's a lot of opportunity even on RDS for config tuning?
Oh, we don't tune their RDS. There is on-demand instance.
Yeah. So you tune the default configuration, like the default MariaDB configuration versus new.
Yeah, it was a default MariaDB configuration that installed on servers without any tricks. Am I right?
Yeah. So that's what I'm asking is, have you ever checked the default configuration in RDS? Like, is it already pre-tuned?
No. You mean the default RDS? Yeah? No, we don't check it.
Any questions? No? Okay, then we have lunchtime, 30 minutes. No? Yeah. First, we will have book signing lottery, so you have a chance to win a book, MySQL cookbook, and then we will have a long coffee break. So, thank you.